This is Capernaum. This was the place Jesus chose to be home. Born in Nazareth, after he grew older and left home, this was his base of operations. As you can see, it's a beautiful place, close to the water. But that's not why Jesus chose this as his base of operations. You see, Capernaum was close to a lot of things. You know, you've heard the expression, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, it was the very opposite here in Capernaum. Capernaum was sort of like the first century version of the internet. When something happened here, everyone else heard about it. This was a destination for people. Because of the warm water springs that were nearby, people would come from all around to try to find healing and help. And indeed, in this place, Capernaum, Jesus did many healings. In fact, here in Capernaum, Jesus did more healings than any other place. It was here in Capernaum he healed blind men. It was here in Capernaum that he healed the mother-in-law of Peter. It was also here in Capernaum that they brought a man who was paralyzed, and because there were so many people crowded in a house to hear Jesus teach, that they opened up the top of the roof, sort of a thatched material, and lowered the man down on a cot. And when Jesus saw him, he said, "Son, your sins are forgiven you." And one of his critics said, "Well, what are you saying? His sins are forgiven. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" And Jesus said, "Just so you know, the Son of Man not only has power to forgive sins, I say to you, rise up, take your bed and walk." And that man was healed. But one of the most well-known stories to happen here at Capernaum involved two people, both in great need. First, there was a man named Jairus, and Jairus was the ruler of the local synagogue. He had a daughter. She was very ill. He asked Jesus, "Please come and heal my daughter." Jesus agreed and was making his way over to the home of Jairus. But as always, the crowd would gather, and they're pushing and they're pulling, and the dust is flying. And there's a woman that happens to be there. And she thinks, if I can touch Jesus, I'll be healed. You see, this woman, she had some kind of a severe medical condition that caused her to constantly bleed. She had spent all of her money on probably quack doctors with all their wacky remedies. No one could help her. But she decided, if I can touch the hem of his garment, I'll be healed. Back in those days, a rabbi would have a strip of blue at the hem of a garment. And maybe she was reaching for the color. And as the crowd is pressing around, and she slips her hand through and manages to touch it, and suddenly Jesus stops and he says, "Who touched me?" Who touched him? Everybody touched him. And he says, "No, I perceive that power has gone out of me." And the crowd parts, and there's probably this woman over there. "Hi." He says, "Woman, great is your faith." And he commended her because this woman received that healing touch because she extended her hand to Jesus. Meanwhile, while this is happening, someone comes up and says, "Oh, don't trouble Jesus any longer. Jairus' daughter, she died." I can imagine the devastation Jairus felt when he heard those words. So sudden, so final. No hope now. Jesus said, "She's not dead. She's only sleeping. Take me to her." He comes to the house, and here's where the daughter of Jairus is, because Jairus was a powerful man. He had the money to hire people to come and mourn. That's right, in those days, they would hire professional mourners who would fill the home with wailing and crying and screaming, and this is the environment Jesus walks into, and he tells everyone, "She's only sleeping." How quickly their wailing, so-called, turns to laughter and even mockery. "You're crazy." Jesus says, "Get these people out of the house." They're all taken out. He goes into the room where the daughter is. This daughter who has left this world. This daughter who has passed into eternity. He's there with Peter, James, and John. And he looks at her and he says, "Little lamb, arise." And life returns to her body, and she sits up again. Imagine the joy that Jairus felt. Maybe you need to be touched by Jesus. Or maybe you need to reach out and touch him. That's what the woman did, and because of that, she was healed. Maybe you've lost a child and you don't feel like there's any hope. Well, in this case, Jesus, of course, raised that little one. But he doesn't always raise the dead, does he? But he always gives us the strength to get through whatever trial we're going through. Here's, to me, the message of the story. Jesus is sufficient for whatever we need in life. Sometimes it's a healing. Sometimes it's a strength to get through a crisis. And when he decides, sometimes he'll even do a resurrection. But it was here in Capernaum so many of those miracles happened. And it's here in your life that they can happen as well.